Hello, you wonderful people. So for today's video, I'm going to discuss the movie Escape Room because I just saw it yesterday. And so, just in general, right off the bat, how did I feel about the movie? I actually liked it. It's actually kind of interesting because when you look at the movie, and this is just me, you could agree or disagree, it's fine. But even though I've never seen the movie, it kind of felt like a bit of like a Cabin in the Woods type of thing. Just what little bit I know about Cabin in the Woods just because I've heard people talk about it. But that kind of mixed with a Saw movie. And in certain regards, I would go as far as saying kind of a Final Destination feel in certain regards. But yeah, the movie actually kind of surprised me in certain regards because I guess like one thing is like going into the characters' backgrounds to like that certain extent. I was like, because I was like, oh, that's interesting that you're even doing that. But then it's like later on as it progresses, like because you start noticing it even when they first get in the room, like there's a fire and then like a man that's kind of like, what the hell? Like I was like, oh, so something personal with you had to deal with fire. So like, oh, over the course of it, I'm like, okay. So you see it obviously more and more as the movie progresses where certain things come up, like Ben knowing the password being Rudolph, like because he remembered everything. So I was like, okay, so it's definitely picking stuff from your past. Like your past is actually the reason you're here in the first place. And I mean, I'm jumping all around here, but I'll go ahead and say it. That's why I was so certain it was going to be Danny, who was going to be like the mastermind behind everything, because for one, he was the first one to die, so I thought that was kind of like a red herring to be like, I thought like maybe he set that up in some shape or form. I know like I probably should have seen that coming just because he legitimately was over here on the ice and then disappeared. Like they show you him dying, like that wasn't for anyone else's point of view but for the audiences, because everyone else over here was over here trying to look for him. So it kind of makes sense. But also he was the one that was the most into, you know, escape rooms and stuff like that. He had done so many, plus at that point, like we hadn't really learned too much about him. And when it got to the medical room later on with like all their files and stuff, I was like, oh, Danny's isn't going to be there. And immediately Zoe read his. I'm like, but then I was like, oh, it must be fake. It must be fake. Turns out not to be the case because his body shows up later on, so he is totally not one of the main people behind this and stuff like that. So that kind of threw me for, because the entire movie I was like, it's going to be Danny, isn't it? Or is it going to be someone else amongst the group? It's literally none of them, because they actually kind of hint to that in the movie. It's like, oh, maybe the mastermind's going to be one of us, and it turned out not to be any of them. So I thought that was kind of interesting, especially because Danny's the one who pointed out the fact is, I don't know why I did that. I do that sometimes, but I don't know. Nevertheless, Danny's the one who was like, oh, there's most likely 5 rooms, and there were 5 rooms. So I was like, huh, he even guessed. I mean, I guess because that's typically how most escape rooms, I've never done an escape room. I've heard people discuss them and stuff like that, but I've never been one of my personally. So I guess like the more extensive ones get longer and stuff like that, but I just didn't know. It's just kind of interesting because he threw that detail out. That's why I thought he was more suspicious too. I mean, in the retrospect, like by the time you got to the end of the movie, it's like, huh, that was like 5 rooms. So that's what made my brain think about that. But nevertheless, it's almost kind of got like this battle royale kind of aspect to it as well, because it's almost like survival of the fittest. I mean, that kind of actually gets said in the movie, but it's like all these people who were the luckiest of the lucky, that they were the one survivors in these like horrible situations that they were in. So it's like, why not pit them against each other to see if they can be lucky again, to see if it is pure luck, or is there something else to it? Is there a human element of just them being kind of, you know, built to survive or some situation, kind of being like a natural born survivalist in some shape. You know what I'm trying to say? So that was kind of an interesting element. I should also talk about the casting too, because I kind of like, obviously the actor who plays Mike, I've seen him in stuff. I don't know his name, but I've seen him most recently in that the NBC medical drama show New Amsterdam. There's the actor who played Danny. I feel like I've seen him in a couple things, but the thing that kind of comes to my head the first is Atypical, because he plays the main protagonist, best friend / co-worker situation. I think it's just out and about his best bud. But along with that is Deborah Ann Wool, who played Amanda. Obviously, she played Jessica in True Blood, while also being Karen Page in the Netflix MCU stuff. You know, Marvel stuff, where she, you know, was in Daredevil, and most recently obviously in The Punisher, which is what kind of got me like even more like, whoa, because I think I saw like one trailer of this a while back, but I completely forgot. So when I saw her pop, I was like, yo, Deborah Ann Wool. I was like, that's crazy, because I just literally saw season 2 of Punisher like 2 days before I saw the movie, so it kind of caught me off guard. I was like, whoa. I mean, I guess arguably that is kind of spoilers, because me even mentioning the fact that Karen's in season 2, but it's like one episode and I ain't going into details, so it's fine, I think. But nevertheless, but it was kind of interesting. Like I said, it like had this Saw element to it where it was kind of like some of the challenges were built around what they kind of experience. Like the whole like fire room was kind of representative of Amanda, that kind of slipped up there, just because, you know, everything that she went through, it was like what, an IED that it went off and she was the only one that survived. So it's like cramped spaces plus like, you know, probably the heat and stuff like that, which is because she was the first one to kind of really freak out about the heat. And it's like, well, under those circumstances you kind of understand why. Then there was like the whole Rudolph being the code to get out, and you know, like I brought up earlier, that being especially important to Ben in the long run. So I actually kind of like how the movie did an interesting thing where obviously like they show you near the end of the movie at the beginning, and I was like, huh, that's interesting. And I do like that because it's still kind of like the journey. You still have that in your mind, but at the same time you're like, oh, that must mean Ben doesn't make it out of there. But then like they kind of mess with you because it's like, because I was thinking like, okay, so Ben ended up going some separate, because the entire time I'm like, okay, at some point Ben's going to go down a separate path and end up on that spot alone. It never, like, it was crossing my mind that like, oh, he might be the last one, but at the same time I'm like, somehow at some point they end up going two separate ways. Like the moment Zoe started concocting like, no, there's going to be another way out, when they were leaving, I was like, oh, she's going to find another way. And then I don't know why I'm saying, because also I just thought about it too. I meant to bring that up. The actor who plays Ben also like, I've seen him in stuff too. Like, I'm just not sure what. Like, there's quite a, like, one thing is like, I think his character's name was Benjamin. He popped up in The Walking Dead. That was probably like what, 2 seasons ago or something like that. Nevertheless, but Ben, like, I thought like, you know, he ended up getting there by himself, but Zoe would end up, you know, somewhere else. But it's like, oh no, Zoe's dead. I'm like, wow, I didn't see that coming, because I thought like they're all the main protagonists, but I felt like Zoe was like the main hero in this regard. But it turns out I was like, oh wow, she's dead. I didn't see that coming. And then she faked it, because I'm like, well, she didn't fake it. Well, she kind of faked it, but she got to the oxygen mask in time to kind of diffuse the whole poison situation. So I was like, that's fascinating. I didn't actually see that coming, so that was kind of neat. It is kind of interesting too, because her not being able to speak up is kind of the worst thing. Like, that's the worst kind of personal thing to have, especially when you're in a life and death situation like that. It's kind of an interesting thing to kind of be like, oh yeah, I'm not very good at speaking up and telling people. So a lot of stuff she ended up kind of handling on her own, like when she was following the compass and reaching to that like polar bear stuff thing to get the magnet they needed. Like, that was an instance where she handled that on her own, didn't tell anyone else what she was up to. That's also something too I kind of feel bad about, was like the whole Danny situation. I'm like, man, like, I don't know if that was just pure dumb luck, because we do see that the ice explodes later on, so it might have been specific. They waited until Danny got there to explode the ice just to cause issues between Ben and the rest of the group, for them to kind of call him out. It's like, oh, you just happened to throw it there and he ends up falling in. It's like, no, they were watching him the entire time, so they probably broke the ice. Because it's like, because why did it wait to that very moment to break it? I mean, they were hinting at it kind of not being safe to walk on the ice, but it's just kind of all walking back and forth, and he just happens to fall in that one specific spot. No one else fell in at any of, well, Ben obviously dropped his leg into that one specific spot, but that was because that was on purpose. But the rest of the ice never really broke like that until they solved all the clues and got the key and everything. So then everything changed. And that's actually kind of an interesting aspect I thought was kind of neat about this too, because it's like, it's not just like one, it's a mastermind, sure, but there's a whole conglomerate behind this, because it takes a lot of money to kind of put together what they put together, like all those different rooms, and also like even like that fake background of like the wall that Danny ended up touching, and then all the code like gas started coming in and stuff like that. Well, the code air started coming in like that, was kind of interesting. Me personally, if you had to pick like, oh, what was my favorite room? It was probably the bar designed room that had the floor dropping out. Probably my favorite room, just because just of how it was shot, and just like them coming in, and you come in and like everything is up, the entire room is upside down like that. I even love Mike being like, how do we even answer the phone? And the phone falls and he just grabs it. I was like, no one's gonna comment on just how cool that was that he just did that like that. But nevertheless, but it just, there was even a moment they kind of flipped it where, you know, where Amanda's putting in a password and like to the safe, and they flipped it so that everything looks right side up. I was like, that's so interesting that you did that. That to me, that was just kind of aesthetically my favorite room in that regard. It's actually kind of interesting because I think the second room was the only room that really had like a part 2 to it necessarily, because you got out getting out of the log cabin, not unless that technically counted as the second, like not unless that technically was the second room, and then the code environment was the third room. I don't know if those would, I mean, it locked behind them, so it might be a situation of that might technically count as like going from room 2 to 3 going out into the code, or that might be all one room. I'm curious how they divided that up. I mean, it's probably not that big of a deal to kind of think about that, but it just crossed my mind just now because like I had said 5 rooms earlier, but I guess if you went by that standard, it could technically be 6, because that's the only room, at least to my recollection, that had another side to it like that, because everything else was like one specific challenge, and well, like there might be multiple challenges within it, but it was all one room that was technically 2 rooms in one. Even going back to my like I said, what was my essentially my favorite room, that upside down room, was like when Amanda started crawling across the like the pool table like that. I was like, dude, that's crazy. That takes some super upper body strength to pull that off and stuff like that, especially while the floor's going around. Like I thought that was kind of neat and crazy, like everyone just kind of like staying on the edges and stuff like that. And then her like jumping down to get the ball. I was like, okay, hop back up real quick. Oh crap, the music stops. She throws the ball to Jason and grabs onto the phone line, and she's like, it's okay, and falls to her death. I was like, that sucks, you know? And it's kind of interesting because Ben kind of starts off being kind of a bit of the asshole in the group, but it quickly shifts over to Jason, because he, from the very beginning, you kind of, I guess like it was always hinting towards who he really was, of being like, all he cared about was his own survival. And when it all came down to it, you saw it at every opportunity, because you're just like, oh, let's press forward, let's press forward. He always kind of came more concerned about himself than others. I mean, he had moments where it seemed like he cared, but you get what I mean? Because, I mean, I probably feel like the one that was the most selfless amongst them, probably Mike. Because when they were defrosting the key, Mike was the one that was holding on to it, being like, no, I got this, I'm fine. And then, you know, and the moment the key got released, what did happen? Jason didn't go like, okay, let's go, guys. He immediately ran off trying to go to the door. Didn't really say anything to anybody, you know. I mean, the others followed quickly after, but still, that just kind of goes to the point. I mean, hell, later on when he tries to kill Ben, you know, because even Ben saw like, oh, there's only one dose, and he's like, I found it. I was like, is Ben just going to inject himself? It's like, no, he was about to turn around like, yo, I found it. And before he even had a chance to say anything, Jason had already attacked him. I mean, and Ben had already like talked about it beforehand, about it being like, yeah, you said all this stuff about your friend being the one to try to kill you, and then he ran off, just happened to run off with the jacket. It's like, no, I don't think that's the case. You probably killed him, because the fact is, you did what you did to Mike, which I'll get to in a second, and you left Zoe behind and stuff like that. I can't believe you did this. Like, all you care. It's kind of interesting because you're kind of forced to work together, because it's like, Ben's like, yes, okay, like, you know, like, I'm stuck with this dude who probably did this. I don't know for sure. It's how me guessing and stuff like that, but at the same time, it's like, well, I just don't have any choice, because if I don't work with him, neither one of us is getting out of here. So there's that. But since I brought it up, the whole Mike situation, that sucks. Because Jason first puts, you know, it's like, oh, this EKG. It's like, oh yeah, put it on, Ben. He's like, what about you? He's like, no, I'll put it on afterwards. Which, yes, he eventually did. Not until after he flatlined Mike, because he was trying to get his heart rate up. And then, like, I was like, oh, we need different heart rates. So, you know, like a high and then a low. And so that was kind of messed up. And when he did it too, he was just kind of like, okay, like that should have been the first key sign too. And it's like, he didn't seem all that broken up about what he did to Mike. It's just kind of like, Mike, oh well, it's kind of, you know, for him, it's like, you know, it's them or us type of situation, which kind of a bit of a bummer in that regard. I did kind of like the trippiness of like the final room, you know, that Jason and Ben were a part of and everything. I thought that, like, aesthetically, I like the trippiness. But other than that, like the whole like Ben actually getting out, like I was bringing up earlier, like him technically winning, I was like, oh crap, I did not, like I said, I thought we are gonna cut back to him getting killed, and then like knowing that Zoe was still alive, I was like, oh, Zoe's gonna get to him in time. It's like, technically, well, she does later, but at that point it's like, no, Ben kind of got out on his own. And I did like that guy being like, oh, I'm the one who crafted everything, but I'm not like the mastermind. And then like Ben's like, oh, so I get to go home now. He's like, oh, like does the, you know, horse get to go home after it wins type of situation, and proceeds to kill him. I was like, oh man. But like the moment I was like, come on, stab him, because you already looked at the wood, and he pulled it out his leg and stabbed you. I'm like, yes. and then Zoe shows up in time to help. So that was awesome. I also thought it was kind of interesting too how the game quickly adapted, because it added the dude who created everything into the game. And I could be wrong, this could be a detail I might have missed. It seemed like he replaced Danny in that regard, so that's why I was like, that kind of made me go, wait, did Danny's picture disappear? So like I said, it could have been faking it, but like I said, everything else is kind of like, in retrospect, it's like, it kind of makes sense to it not being Danny in that regard, but still. And I thought it was kind of interesting. I was like, because I was almost halfway expecting, you're not, like, because it's the whole thing of like, it's almost like once you're part of the game, there's no escape in the game. It's like, how do you know you've really gotten out? I mean, because there was that whole, I forgot the word, Dr. Wooten Yu, is that it? I forgot what it was, but I was like, what is that? We've seen it the entire game. I don't know what it is. And it was like, it was a anagram. Is that what I'm thinking of? For No Way Out. But the point I was making too is like, they were coming back with the police and everything. And so it's like it's all going. It's like, once again, this is like a large scale operation. So in the time by everything happening, you know, they were able to kind of quickly wrap everything up, remove the bodies, do this and that, change everything, which, you know, that shows you just how powerful. And you know, because that must mean that everything was situated, like their headquarters and stuff like that, like all the people that kind of keep this whole engine running, they had to be like nearby to kind of dismantle everything. And that like, I mean, it had to be what, maybe a couple hours, but to dismantle all of that in that time frame, like, that takes some real manpower. But I mean, to be fair, you know, because it was like late at night by the time she got there. When they got out, it was almost like morning, so it was about, probably gave them like almost the entire day maybe to get it fixed up. But still, kind of playing into what I was talking about before about this kind of being like a battle royale thing of sorts, because it seems like there were spectators too, because it's like, oh, the rich and powerful like kind of pay for this whole thing. So I guess that's even more reason why they're able to do what they're doing, because there are rich people paying to watch it and see, you know, all these tragic heroes and stuff like that, people, these tragedies, and seeing the, you know, because it seemed, because the dude that talked about it, they had done it other times before, but with different people with different backgrounds, and this time they decided to pick tragic heroes, in the sense, all these people with tragic backgrounds and circumstances, and it just kind of all fed into like the story, that arc that they were building for this particular escape room extravaganza, essentially. And what kind of all plays into that whole ending that I thought was kind of interesting, because it's like Zoe's like, yeah, go talk to Ben if that's the case. It's like, yeah, but Ben's got all these drugs, and I'm like, right. Of course, it hasn't been long enough for all that to work its way out of his system and stuff like that. But still, I was like, man, that's crazy. And then like we skip to like 6 months later, and they've kind of like, you know, little advancements in their life, but you know, the bodies started popping up of everyone from the game, and all of it's meant to be looking like accidents. Once again, showing just how powerful the people behind this are. And so Zoe's convinced of like, no, we're going to go after this. We have to go after them. Ben's reluctant, but hey, let's do it. And then you hard cut to the plane situation. I was like, where's Zoe? Where's Ben? I was like, that's kind of made me kind of feel a little Final Destination like. I mean, obviously, like all the incidents around them to a certain degree, even the rooms, but like that, the whole plane thing in particular made me kind of think very Final Destination. I guess also because like literally the first Final Destination movie literally dealt with a plane situation. So I was like, where's Ben? Where's Zoe? Like, are they going to help with these or something? Like, I didn't know what was going on. And then all of a sudden, I'm like, oh God, the plane's about to crash and stuff like that. And then bam, it hits the mountain. And I'm like, oh, wait. Because I thought that was supposed to be representative of kind of like the thing of like, oh, when it's all said and done, Ben and Zoe had, you know, died off screen or whatever. I thought that's what that was kind of, you know, alluding to. But then it's like, no, this was set up for Ben and Zoe's playing, because it's like, oh, you know, like, obviously, because I was curious, like, when Zoe was kind of like, oh, we're going to deal with them, I was like, because I didn't know, because I know the movie's like an hour and 40 minutes, roughly, and so I hadn't looked at the clock, so I was like, how much of this movie is left? Like, is there time, like, are they about to go, like, do this, or is this set up for a sequel? It's like set up for a sequel to a certain degree, because I'm sure it all depends on how well this movie did, and, you know, whether or not they'll make a sequel to it. I feel like if they were going to do anything, like especially the way things end, it's going to be like, oh, I'm glad when it's all said and done that Zoe got over her fear of flying and stuff like that. So that's why it kind of makes it go, could that have been her professor in some shape or form? The fact is that it was someone that close, you know, Because that's also another interesting thing about this movie too. It's like, this movie didn't have that big of a cast. I don't know if this was kind of like a lower budget movie in certain regards. I kind of didn't feel like it was, but maybe it was. But because obviously like a lot of scenes take place in the same rooms and stuff like that, so sets and stuff like that probably a little more consistent because you only need a certain amount. In the sense of things, I don't know movie magic. I try not to break about movies like that because I'm just like, hey, sit back, relax, and enjoy. Don't think about it too much type of situation. Don't look and see how the cake is made, essentially. I don't know, like there's a more appropriate phrase that I'm just missing. Nevertheless, it's just kind of interesting because it's like, yeah, the main, like there's other characters, but it's mainly just this main cast that you follow throughout the movie. So and they're the ones you stick with like 90% of the movie, so it's just kind of interesting in the back of my head. Yeah, it feels like when everything's kind of said and done, like Zoe and Ben are going to die on a flight, because they were even being like, oh yeah, there's like a 4% chance of survival for anyone in this plane crash. To be fair, she survived a plane crash before, but they're probably implementing this to be a little different so that she doesn't potentially, you know, or at the very least they're trying to be like, hey, let's see, you know, if she's lucky or not, or was her previous situation in a plane crash actually something that will prepare her for this, you know, her experience or whatever. I mean, what does that same thing apply to Ben or not? I also thought it was kind of interesting too, because I mean, I would say like I did not see it around to see if there were like any like in credits or whatever like that, so I might have missed something, because I always associate that with superhero movies, but nowadays I'm like, I don't know if like other movies are doing that now too, so that kind of makes me paranoid. So there might have been something I missed at the end, but it was also like you never actually got to the reveal of who the mastermind behind this was, and I guess at the end of the day it kind of doesn't matter to a certain degree. You know, like I said, if they ever did a sequel, it'd probably be like kind of expanding upon this world, kind of first finding out a little bit more about how this whole thing got started, potentially. You know, it might kind of do like a Purge type of situation, or even a Saw situation, because like those movies, the timelines are kind of all over the place in certain regards, because some movies take place before others, even though they're in this numeral situation. I mean, a lot of stuff kind of does that nowadays, where it's kind of like, oh yeah, like as the movies are going, or whatever has going on, we've decided to kind of go back in time a little bit, kind of show you wherever, like using a great example would be the Purge, because that kind of has going back in time to show you like, oh yeah, the first Purge and everything. So in my mind, it might be something where we get the reveal in potentially other movies if there end up being other movies. What I also thought was kind of interesting, because I went to see this movie with one of my sisters and my nieces, and so my sister had an interesting reaction to the movie, like, because she was like, she didn't like the way the movie ended, because it's a situation of like, I think she probably doesn't like movies that have like the hero technically losing in the end, because for her it's like, okay, Zoe and Ben, they won, they survived this and that, they got away, they got to live their lives for the next 6 months, but then everything else was set up to be like, oh yeah, in the end she's just being set up to lose. And my sister said she did not like that, so I thought that was kind of an interesting aspect to it, because it is kind of like, oh, it's like, oh, you won. No, you didn't win. We're still playing this game. Once again, it kind of plays into it, the whole aspect of like, there's no way out. Even when you think you're out, when you won, it's all part of a greater game, because now it's like, I guess you got a little reprieve in that 6 months, but now it's like right back to the game. The game is ready to strike at any moment, at any time, at any point of your life. So like I said, that's just kind of all kind of rushing through my head about everything. So like I said, at the end of the day, I enjoyed it. I'd be very interested to see what they would do if they did do a sequel. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about in this video. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.